Drama. Action. Comedy. Palace intrigue. Story Squad presents Clash of the Pencils. Wow, good evening, folks. We're here in Milford, Delaware on Fall 25. We have some great story matchups for you tonight. We'll also recap all the day's highlights in Clash of the Pencils action. Welcome back to the nightly live stream, the most watched creative writing esport league live stream in the history of the internet. That is a fact, folks. I'm your host, Tom Sherman, and we're here as we are every weeknight to review the top 3 Clash of the Pencils submissions from around the net, get the latest scores, and see who's atop the leaderboard. We field anywhere from 0s to 10s of submissions daily, which then get run through a high-tech computer, Storybot 3000, who, among other things, uses old paper clips to analyze every story. We then take Storybot's top 3 selections and let you, the public, vote on them to determine tonight's winner. Joining me tonight is Greg the Nutmeg Peterson. Why do they call you the Nutmeg?
Well, it's a nice spice. I don't know. I like to dribble. I like to throw passes between people's legs, Tom.
Right you are, Nutmeg. What's that? Like
it's a basketball play. You throw it like through their legs. It's nutmegging them.
Right. No, I get it. I thought you were going to go. I thought you were going to talk about Malcolm XT, but hey, basketball's just as good. So before we get underway, let's first show the folks what they're playing for today. This is a look here at the NFT that they're playing for. That's right. This isn't the actual NFT that they're playing for. It's an IOU of an NFT. Well, it's an NFT of an IOU for a different NFT. And we had some folks who were wondering if I was just putting up a random picture that I had just made on Microsoft Paint. And I just want to prove to the folks that no, this is real. This is see, here's the NFT. It's on OpenSea. This is all above board, folks. This is
the future.
Yeah, this is real. A little too real, honestly.
JPEGs, no, NFT.
OpenSea. Oh yeah. And as you can see down here by the description, the IOU NFT 1 out of 10K, this represents a unique NFT from a 1 out of 10,000 set that I owe you. Not necessarily the first of that set, but this is the most important part. Trust me, I'm good for it. Okay? That's no more questions.
That launched an entire armada of crypto ships right there. We're good for it.
That's a fact. So let's see. Before we get underway, let's take a look at the current scoreboard. Joanna Man on top, followed by Slice and Sar Blue 7788, our top 3 from last night. Meanwhile, Dragon Attack, Jabberwocky, and the Doctor all on the board and in contention. And then Champion scoring a 0 yesterday on a really tough. They swung for the fences, and sometimes you strike out, but we'll see if they can reverse their fortunes today. And tonight's prompt, that's also so a prince and or princess are trapped in a castle dungeon. How do they escape? And what's interesting here, Greg, is they the characters and the setting are there, and it's really a plot function right here that the authors are dealing with.
Unless the setting gets abstracted into the metaphorical.
Well, right you are. I mean, that's huge. A lot of these authors have shown a great deal of imagination, and they might just be able to take that prompt and turn it on its head. I've seen it before, and I'm sure we'll see it again.
Let's get into it.
So yeah, let's get into it. I like what you're saying there. Our first video coming in from Slice. Let's see if he's got what it takes. Back in the day, an incorrigible prince ruled an island rich with resources and beauty. The dastard usurped his father, the king, and set him adrift in the ocean, bound to the mast of a great sailing ship. The island people had loved the king, and all despised the vile prince for his coup. Upon the prince's own coronation, he announced his heavy taxation on farmers, introduced his own spiritual cult, and proclaimed surgeons, barristers, and midwives as wards of the state. All actions were immediate and burdensome. Resentment grew virally, and a people's revolution capsized the prince's dynasty. The prince was thrown into his own castle dungeon to rot. One day, a barrister visited the prince in the dungeon. The prince pleaded with him for advice on how to escape the dungeon. The barrister offered to bring forth representatives to hear penance from the prince. If the prince would repent, perhaps the people would show mercy and get him out. The first day, the Fodzar visited the prince. She spent hours berating the prince on the detriment his taxation had caused her family and industry. She vowed to make sure he never ate again. The next day, the Godzar visited the dungeon and cursed the prince for his blasphemy. He assured the prince that his spirit would be set adrift in the sea of afterlife as punishment for his patricide. The third day, the Bodzar arrived, offering mercy. She gave him a knife with which to kill himself. The prince refused further visitors and starved to death days later. Upon his death, his sinister spirit awakened as an ethereal cobra, and he slithered out the bars and halls of the dungeon. He plagued the farmland, strangled the souls on the island, and poisoned their bodies. All the people of the island succumbed to his wrath. The snake prince ruled happily, and no one lived ever after. So here we have a prince usurping the throne, instituting a repressive regime, ultimately being overthrown in a revolution, and then into his own dungeon for a nice little taste of irony. And yet, when he's in there, he has a chance to atone and find good graces with the people again. And yet, after being berated 3 times, he says, you know what? I'm just going to die and come back as a cobra to seek my vengeance. And ultimately giving us kind of an anti-fairy tale here where no one lived ever after.
Yeah, what I loved about this was it was kind of inverting the old Dickensian Christmas tale with the 3 ghosts and the Godzar and the Bodzar and the opportunities to repent. But then instead of, giving Bob Cratchit the day off because today is Christmas Day, he's like, no, I'm going to starve myself, die, emerge as a cobra spirit, and then if his whole sort of economic platform of heavy taxation wasn't enough, he then uses a kind of spiritual magic to ruin the lands that his taxation scheme ultimately did. There was an interesting tension here between very modern bureaucratic administration of resources and then an old-fashioned mythological spiritual dimension that it almost like was a regression. If one way is usually like most of the tales go from this sort of the old world into the new, this was a sort of a new world back into the old. A bit of a anti-progress narrative. Interesting. I liked the vocabulary. Incorrigible prince, a usurpation tale. I wanted to know. There's a lot. This was epic in scope. So many different levels of the society. So many. There was a lot of time that passed with the sending the king, the beloved king, off.
Right. Yeah. There was a whole revolution that occurred. I mean, it definitely spanned a length of time and space. I think the characters were very strong. The prince was a strong character. The barrister was an interesting was interesting as well. I mean, he was in there and he was able to kind of help the king or the prince a bit. The czars were all added their own little flair based on their little sector of society. I would bring this right down close into the hot zone. I don't know about you.
The one thing that I'll say, yes, there was social complexity, but there wasn't real depth, and we didn't really get any dialogue or we didn't know any of these characters. We just got a lot of ranks. And I found it. I felt like I didn't know any. They were ultimately kind of flat. Plot wise, I will give this a lot of credit for a wild plot in which everything happens, and the ending was maybe not ultimately satisfying, but interesting. And I wasn't expecting the twists at the end. The serpent reigns of a cobra prince to then haunt the lands. That's some spooky stuff. That's good.
That was good. And it really, like you say, the twists really, I mean, there were multiple that kind of took place throughout, but like really that last one of him being like, you know what, I'm just going to die and turn into a cobra. Never saw it coming. And then he executed with that final quarter page to turn that twist into a satisfying ending. Let's talk about setting a little bit. I mean, we had an island. It was beautiful. It was full of resources. We had the dungeon description a little bit. What do you think? I mean, did it leave anything lacking for you, or was it good enough?
It felt like a board game. Felt like a complex German Settlers of Catan board game in one-page story form. In some ways, it was about resource allocation. My brain was all about if this guy had the magical cobra power to just haunt the lands, why did he bother answering to his subjects? Why did he bother with political strategy? If he had a spiritual move in his back pocket, why did he make the midwives property of the state and all the other various levels? He went through a lot of energy if he could have just emerged with that the whole time. Did he know that? Did he discover that? Ultimately, the setting, the mix of the magic and sort of the material allocations was a bit jarring for me. It was unclear how the system worked and what the limits of one and the limits of the other were. I love the ambition behind it, but for a single page story, it might have been too much.
Well, there you have it. I think that's a satisfying triangle where I'm at. I don't know about you. Is there any other tweaks here that you want to pull in or out?
The last thing I'll say was the language was precise. I really liked the capsize the prince's dynasty. I like the image of sending the father off tied to the mast. That brought the setting to life.
Yeah, and maybe we should think about in the future adding a description sort of setting, because like descriptive language, sometimes it doesn't quite fit into the setting, but it was there. The classic sort of slice language that we're used to, except it wasn't necessarily character driven, which is normally his forte. But let's move on to the next one. This is a new person in the winner's circle for at least this week. Let's look at Champion's story tonight. Help! Save me! The pink-draped princess screamed while an overgrown snapping turtle carried her into the depths of a dungeon. Click! Zerp! The TV screen faded to black. Red-hot rage blinded my eyes. The anger of 1,000 banshees rose from my stomach, gaining momentum up my esophagus before bursting from my lips. Arg! What are you doing? I hadn't saved my game. Now I'm going to have to play that level all over again. I lashed out at my brother, who just giggled gleefully at my pain. And that's why you became a plumber? My therapist asked incredulously. I thought you promised not to judge me, I replied, unconsciously fiddling with my coveralls. No judgment. It's just... The doctor trailed off, searching for a diplomatic reply. Ding ding! A timer rang. Oh, look at that. Time's up. Some pipes you can't unclog. So, here we are in the midst of a video game childhood rivalry, sibling fight, and turns out that it was all just a memory, and the narrator is actually in a doctor's office or a therapist's office many years later discussing that and being met with a little bit of resistance of from the therapist about that's why they wanted to become a plumber. And then the time just running out, and that's that. So where do we begin with this one, Greg?
Well, I think something that's interesting to me about this is it felt a little like the movie Inception, right? In which we just get these dramatic shifts about a quarter of the way when we go from video game, and then the perspective shifts from help save me, and we get this thing to it's a TV screen, and then we get the my eyes, and we change perspectives there. Then we get another shift into the therapist's office, and with ultimately the decision driving around why somebody wanted to become a plumber based upon a princess and a frog descending into a kind of dungeon on a video game back at a presumably a formative time, that they were mining or excavating in this hard therapeutic cathartic process to try to give birth. I'm wondering about the relationship to the prompt to the final product. Is the dungeon the plumbing? Is the actual occupation the dungeon that we're trying to describe? Is this plumber trying to escape from the fate of having to be a plumber? I'm interested. I'm interested in the worlds overlaying, because in one way we start with a very traditional cartoon scene, but then it goes as far away from that as possible. So on the avant-garde, on the plot, I thought it was interesting.
The layers of zooming out that you're talking about, that was quite a, there was multiple twist on twist, and you're never really quite sure what's the perspective that you're supposed to be viewing, I guess, or as the reader. But then, again, like, I don't know, the characters are kind of lacking. It's basically this plumber and the therapist are the two characters beyond the video game characters and the sibling. The plot, I'm not sure what the plot was. I think if anything, we can give strong marks to setting. That's kind of where I'm at with this one.
I felt it disjarring. I felt it interesting to try to see the abstract links, but ultimately I don't know what story it felt like something that was trying to be expressed that ultimately might not have been expressed. It was a story that asked a lot of questions.
That's a fact. And I think kind of how we were talking when we were reviewing the prompt, they might have been trying to break out of that scope of princess in the dungeon that need to escape, and yet they just didn't quite execute. You know what I mean? Like they wanted to set it up as the standard sort of princess in the dungeon, and they tried to pivot out of it, but it just never quite satisfies the prompt and really takes it to that next level that Champion might have been going for there.
Storybot was a fan.
Storybot was a fan. So, that's, and that's honestly, besides the people out there that are voting and making the choices, Storybot is the second biggest person that you need. I mean, obviously they're not a person, they're a computer, but sometimes computers. I mean, look, I am on the forefront of the robot abolitionist movement. We've been over that before. We don't have the time for it again tonight, Greg. We got to get to the next story.
Let's do it.
That's coming in from Joanna Man.
Woo.
Yeah, and after last night, this is the champion from last night, so they're probably bringing some heat. Clang clink. The quarter dropped into the receptacle, and he grabbed the joystick, knuckles white, eyes fixated on the prize, the princess doll he desperately wanted to bring home to his daughter. Well, not his home anymore, after he'd gotten kicked out of the house, but his daughter's home. Jab, 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 jab. His right hand began furiously punishing the button to release the gripper down when it moved over the doll's head. This wasn't his first attempt, and it likely was his 7th or 8th, perhaps more. He couldn't let himself get distracted by the thought that he was burning through money he could ill afford to spend, and he had nothing to show for it. As the arm of the gripper fell down towards the doll, all memory of frustration or failure was pushed aside by the all-consuming hope that this one time was going to work. He'd come close. On the second try, the gripper position was perfect, but he'd tried the closing of the metallic hand wrong. He wasn't going to make that mistake again. He wasn't going to let this poor princess doll sit in this claustrophobic plastic cage any longer. He was the knight in shining armor to rescue her from the alligator toy beneath her right arm and the ugly koala bear sticking up between the doll's legs. The gripper's fingers were outstretched and quickly descending. He was ready, and his index finger positioned a fraction of an inch from the button he needed to push. Could he free this poor doll and give the princess the life she deserved? A spot in his daughter's bed next to Bebis, the named dog stuffed animal? He didn't have the time or the money to continue this game. He needed to win now. He pushed the button. The gripper hand closed on the princess. The doll was pulled upwards, his shoulders slouched. He took a breath, and he felt the sweat on his back. As the arm jerked back to drop off the doll, it shook the hand, and down fell the princess. So here we have an estranged father somewhere playing the Claw arcade game we all know and love in hopes of winning a daughter's approval. We see him fighting off doubt and terror, and then a moment of relief as he successfully snatches the princess from her dungeon cage, ensnared by alligators and koala bears. So it looks like Joanna Man, like Champion, kind of went for the breaking out of the prompt role, but he might have executed a little bit better.
Very interesting. It was almost as if the precise physical manipulation of the joystick and the incredibly detailed descriptions there, the clang clink, the nickel that he can ill afford, led that physical manipulation of the machine was almost a cover story for an atonement or even an emotional manipulation trying to recover what's ultimately unrecoverable, which is his estrangement from his daughter. And this was character development. This is how you write a story. I could feel the desperation. I could feel the sort of the all-consuming hope that this character was projecting into this stupid little arcade game. The claustrophobic sense of being trapped and trying to free that mimicked what must have been the character feeling trapped in a different kind of setting. Very, very subtle resonances between a small scene that fractally can extrapolate into a much bigger theme. Yeah, what do you think?
I'm with you as far as the character development. You were in this poor sap's mind. He was desperate to get that doll and be the hero, not just for the doll, but ultimately his daughter. And my questions, though, were along the lines of, like, where is this arcade? Is he in like a CD bar, or is he in a skating rink? Where exactly is he, and why? Like, what's the motivation that he needs to get this present to his daughter by? Is it her birthday? Is it Christmas? Is it just he needs to? He just wants to do it, and this is what he does during his happy hour. I don't know. So for that reason, I think the setting is probably the weakest part of this story. I do think the characters and the plot were very, very strongly developed. But yeah, I just didn't. I wasn't quite there with the setting.
Let's see how America voted.
That's what I like to hear. So we're going to update this leaderboard right now. Storybot 3000 tells me that it's been updated successfully. So there's only one way to find out, folks. And let's see. All right, here we are. Wow, Champion on top with a wow, that is. And then Slice coming in second, Joanna Man coming in third, defying the expectations of these two announcers, if nothing else. The Doctor coming in fourth at with 36. That's going to affect the weekly leaderboard. And now, wow, look at this. Slice and Joanna Man neck and neck, 280 apiece. Champion making moves, coming from 7th to 3rd place with 150 points. Sar Blue 7788 hanging in there in 4th place at 115. The Doctor, Dragon Attack, and Jabberwocky still in it. They're not out of there. A couple good stories. They'll be right up at the top of the leaderboard. All right. That's all we have from Greg today. Seems like he's got to be places, and that's fine with me because I get to go to my favorite. Oh, actually, we need to look at the prompt for the day. Coming up, 2 kids build a robot to fight crime. All right. Seems simple enough. You've got your characters, which are 2 kids and 1 robot, at least, it seems. And plot is crime fighting. Setting to be determined. That's kind of up to you folks. And but before we go and let you get started on those stories, let's go to the top 5 sentences of the day. Number 5 from The Doctor. Just a day ago, he was a happy-go-lucky hippie with long hair and a good attitude. Now he looked like Macklemore and acted like a belligerent frat boy. From an epic tale about a man's haircut turning him into a monster and entrapping his girlfriend in the basement. Didn't make the top 3, but it was good nonetheless. Number 4 coming from Champion. And that's why you became a plumber? My therapist asked incredulously. Spinning the tale on a dime, another zoom out on an Inception-like story. Number 3 from Slice. All the people of the island succumbed to his wrath. The Snake Prince ruled happily, and no one lived ever after, giving a classic turn of events, upside-down irony for the fairy tale, the anti-fairy tale, I guess, is the proper way to say that. Number 2, Joanna Man writing, well, not his home anymore after he gotten kicked out of the house, but his daughter's home. Really setting up that character development and really driving the character in the plot from that line was this desperate man trying to win his daughter's approval by grabbing the princess out of the claw machine. Number 1 line of the night from Slice. Upon his death, his sinister spirit awakened as an ethereal cobra, and he slithered out the bars and halls of the dungeon with that prince doing tapping into the spiritual world to get vengeance on the physical world. Wow. Just another stellar showing from our writers today. And that wraps up another edition of Clash of the Pencils nightly live stream. And until next time, we'll see you out on the paper. Do you want to participate in the Clash of the Pencils and Story Squad universe? It's easy. Join us on Twitter or in our Discord server at Story Squad HQ. There's lots of ways to participate. Draw some fan art. Play our addictive game of jokes and master strokes, Word Hoax. Or join Greg's monthly book club. And as always, remember to pay your cat tax.
Meow.
Money, fame, and love can all be found here at Story Squad.